Hello, and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. That's me. This is my podcast about finding your success in the gift of who you truly are. This podcast is about conversations with people who have discovered that. They know what it looks like, what it feels like. And this is all in the hopes that you will find inspiration in it on ways to use your unique gifts in pursuing your passions, making your dreams come true, and engaging with the world in the way that you were created to serve. Now, I do hope this gets deep because that is where we find all the best stuff, but don't get it twisted. This is about the fun in life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's be brave, be free, and be you together. Now, today's guest is the founder, author, national television personality, and brand ambassador behind the award-winning cookbook, Grandbaby Cakes, and the food website, grandbabycakes.com. She's a Today Show tastemaker, a regular on Good Morning America, Cooking Channel, OWN, and Food Network, most recently as the host of Stab That Cake. You have seen her as a contributor on all the talk shows, Rachel Ray, The Kitchen, Dr. Oz, and in publications like O, Essence, Bon Appetit, and more. She and her first cookbook have been honored with an NAACP Image Award nomination and a Gourmand World Award. She was one of my favorite guests when I was hosting on television. Her sweet, bubbly personality always lifted our spirits as much as her amazing cakes and desserts. She is a proud wife and mother, and a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I am honored to welcome Jocelyn Delk Adams to the Fearless Authenticity podcast. What happens when a Delta and an AKA get together to figure some stuff out, girl?
We're going to have some fun, that's for sure. How are you? That was a fantastic intro. I've missed you so much. This is amazing.
I have missed you too, sis. You are just one of the brightest lights that I always look forward to talking to back in the day. And I just look back at what you've done and I just go, look at my girl. Look at my girl.
Oh my gosh, that means so much to me because I feel like we're always constantly moving. All the pieces are always going and you never really take a moment to sort of step back. So I always feel like when someone's reading my bio, that's kind of like a moment of me breathing in some of the things that I've done because you know you're just constantly moving. So that meant a lot to me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, let's start with the new stuff that's on the horizon. You have a new cookbook that's coming out in March. Everyday Grand. I love this title, Soulful Recipes for Celebrating Life's Big and Small Moments. Because the thing is, even though you started with cakes and desserts, some of my favorite stuff that's on your Facebook page and on your social is like the easy everyday things that I can cook to eat because I'm not gonna bake a cake every day, right?
Right. Most people aren't and for some reason people think I do that. I'm like, I'm not baking every day. Like, I don't expect you to bake every day. But like, it's for feeling good about every single moment, like making something that seems really, very ordinary and just kind of turning it up a notch and specializing it and just making it feel kind of grand in any type of way you can. Because I just feel like, we just move in and out of days and, we're constantly like looking ahead at like what might be special. But what if we could make this moment special?
I'm going to just pause and let that sink in.
It's so real, right? Like I'm constantly looking at my calendar. I'm like, oh, I can't wait for this coming up. But, life is in the now. Like every moment we should be trying to approach and trying to make that feel a little bit more grand. And so I'm really excited about the book because I think it's a lot more than just a cookbook.
It is. And I think most of your work is like that. And I think the way that you tell your family story through food, because so many of our family stories are through food. Some of our best memories are around tables with dessert and loaded with food, or even just that favorite one dish your mama used to make. And it wasn't something you had to like struggle to eat your vegetables. It actually tasted good. You were like, I can't wait till mama makes that again.
Yes.
What is it about that for you in your work? Because I feel like that's sort of where the spark in your work comes from. You talk a lot about authenticity in your work, and it shines through. And I love that alignment between the two of us because that's not something that we ever talked about when you used to
No.
come on the show with us
Yeah.
back in the day, in the first few years before the first
Yeah.
cookbook came out. And you've told the story about how your work basically started as a blog, as a side hustle, as an
Right.
expression of who you are, but now it's this amazing brand. Can you talk about your life and career path pre grandbaby cakes, and then the moment you realized that that expression, the grandbaby cakes expression, was more authentic for you than what you were working in?
Sure. So I always knew I wanted to do something creative. Like that was just always what I was going to do. And I was a mass media communications major. And I actually spent a lot of time working behind the scenes. I was like a production assistant for the Judge Mathis show. I worked in extras casting for movies that came through Chicago. I literally just kept, like dibbling and dabbling in everything because I was really sort of unsure exactly what I wanted to do at the time. But I kept really just going back into the kitchen when I wanted to just find myself. And so I was baking like my grandmother's recipes, and I would constantly go to work and I would just bring in cake, and people would be like, "Could you make me a cake? Can I buy a cake like, for my birthday?" And I would just be like, "Sure." And I just had like this little small, like 1-bedroom apartment. And I was constantly baking cakes for friends and family. And I realized I was like, there's just something here. Like it's where I'm the most happy. It's where I feel the most fulfilled. And there was just this sense of connection. But I never really tied the two together, that there was a connection between, being a mass media communications major and how that's all about connection, right? And all about reaching out to other people, and, that connection to food, and how much I wanted to share the story of the recipes that my grandmother gifted me with, and that legacy, and kind of move that into other people's homes. So it was just a different way of connecting.
So, what was it that made you realize that this was the thing, right? And what advice do you have for people? Because I think, a
Yeah.
lot of times when we talk about your authentic self and things like that, people don't realize, they're like, how do I find that? And I believe it's an ongoing process, and there's a
Yes.
lot of different paths toward it. What was the path that worked for you in discovering that moment and making
Mhm.
that connection? Because it sounds like there was a drive that it was coming, but it took
Mhm.
you going, oh, so
Oh yeah, the aha moment that everyone
yeah.
talks about. Um, I was just always very driven, but I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, right? I was just constantly trying to figure it out. So I even like set up this group when I was like when I turned 30. And I was like, okay, this group of women, we're gonna come together and we're going to support each other on this journey to finding out what we want to do, because I was still in the process of not knowing. So I think what my best advice would be for someone is to try a lot of stuff, get a group of people who can support each other. We were all kind of like, we don't know, kind of just like, we're just out here. Like we knew we wanted more. We knew we were destined for more, but we didn't know what that path looked like for us. Like we didn't have it. Cause a lot of people I will talk to, they know right away. They're like, oh, I want to do this. Right. And I wasn't in that position. I didn't see sort of where that light was. I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I just kind of felt like I was just in a state of confusion. So when I had the moment, I was baking for friends, and a friend of mine, Leslie, I always tell this story because I always want to give her props. She was like, you should start a blog. Like, you're always putting just recipes online, and you're sharing like your cakes, and like they look amazing. And like everyone loves them. Like, you need to start a blog. Because I was telling her how burnout I had become from just baking for people constantly. And the first thing everyone tells you when you want to bake is you should open a bakery. And I was like, I don't think that's my ministry. Thank you, but I don't think that's my ministry. I don't want to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning constantly churning it out. I was like, I need to figure out a way where I can still be creative, still connect with people, and also share the recipes. And the blog was the first step. And when I started it, it was like the first moment of having kind of like this electric impulse where I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Like I'm working 9 to 5, but every night I was rushing home to like work on a new blog post or shoot new recipes. And it was all very new and fresh, but very exciting.
I love that idea of rushing home to do something, rushing somewhere to do something, like you can't wait. I used to tell interns, you just remind me of some really good advice apparently that I used to give when interns would ask me, you know, how to go about being in broadcast. I would say, say yes until it's a hard no. Say yes to everything until it's a hard no.
Because I tried everything.
Because the thing is that until it's a hard no, you really don't know. And there's a lot of things you think you're gonna love that you go,
that's not it.
That ain't it. That's really not it. And then there's some things that you think you wouldn't like that it's an absolute yes, because there are things about it that you can't see from the outside until you're in that moment.
Until you try it for yourself. Yes.
Now, how was the transition though for you from behind the scenes to in front of the camera? Like you're a natural. I've always thought that since the first time you stepped in our studio. But I do know that for some production staff people, the last place they want to be is in front of a camera. What kind of advice do you have for people, especially folks who are trying to build community, become influencers, and make that transition from creator to on-air creator? Because on-camera creation is a little bit different.
It's so different. And like you said, like it was never something that I had in mind. When you start a blog, you think, okay, I'm pretty much anonymous. I'm going to type my little blogs. I'm going to type my little recipes, and then I'm just going to push them out into the world. And you may see a photo of me holding a cake, and that's pretty much our connection, right? That's it. But then there was something about being able to actually speak with people, you know, in person, and then communicate with a larger audience about everything that I loved about what I was doing, that felt really appealing. And so when I had my first television segment, this is maybe like a year after I started blogging, you know, everyone was like, whoa, like you didn't have any nerves or anything. And I was like, well, I don't know why it felt so comfortable, but I just ended up loving it, you know, and I couldn't wait to just continue to do it. And I never knew that it would amount to this at all. Like I never knew that this was the path. But like you said, being open to things that you think that you may not even be interested in, just saying yes to a lot of things and just kind of escaping what you think the criteria is or what you think like the box is, right? That you're supposed to fit in. Cause it's like most bloggers think, well, I'm just going to do this. And then I was like, well, I'm going to try TV, you know, I'm going to write books. I'm going to expand my brand in different ways and figure out exactly what I like about it, because I feel like it keeps it interesting and exciting for me. Like I'm never doing the exact same thing every day. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, same here. I feel like sometimes when we can't make a choice or don't want to make a choice among different things, maybe the choice isn't required, you know, like back in the day, I had a bunch of different jobs, and it's funny because this is a theme this season. I just had this conversation with Dr. Ian. About all the different things we're into. And I've known Ian since we started out together. He was an intern when I had just started at a television station. So we have seen each other, you know, advance through things. But one of the things we talk about is that people will say, oh, you got to stick to one thing to create a brand.
They make you compromise.
Right.
They make you compromise immediately.
And I don't think that's fair. How did you have to navigate that when you started doing different things?
I even had a friend recommend to me, there's this book called The One Thing. And yes, and it's all about tailoring all of your goals and just putting them in this one box, because they say you really can't succeed until you're more focused and until you prioritize exactly what it is you want to do. And if you start with one thing and put all of your attention and your passion into that, then you will succeed faster. And I've always found that to be, I don't know, boring. And I'm not sure if because I like so many things. I'm a Gemini. I'm all over the place. And, so I'm like, if you tell me I just have to do this one thing, I'm going to crash and burn because I just can't focus on one thing. I need to sort of just have my hands everywhere. Right. Yeah.
You know what's interesting? And I never heard of that one thing, and I'm glad I didn't.
Yes.
But early in my career, when I was in radio and trying to do all these different things, one of my friends was married to a guy who was a comedian and a writer. And this is what he said to me. He said, Jeanne, he was like, you can do a lot of things. He said, try one thing first and get really good at that. He was like, and still think about all these other things you want to do, but use that one thing as the platform to jump off into these other things. He said, because once you get good at one thing, you prove to people that you're good, and then they will trust you to try other things.
Yes, it ends up opening doors. It does. And I think starting with the blog and starting with specializing on recipes. But the thing about a blog is it does still require so many skill sets and so many ways for you to, I was doing photography, I was writing, I was in the kitchen testing recipes, I was doing social media. So I was really still doing a ton of things within the one thing.
Right. And which one of those skills do you think was the most challenging for you, or the one that you were like, the minute I can get rid of this one thing and let somebody else do, I can't wait till I can pay somebody else to do that?
Honestly, probably the photography.
Really?
Because in the beginning, it was all about, for me, like the process of food photography is very specialized. And, originally I was just using my cell phone, and I was like, but I really need to focus on it. I bought like all of the camera, like I bought the DSLR camera, like I focused on learning lighting, I focused on props, like the process of shooting a recipe. I would like photograph the recipe as soon as I was done with my last test. Then I'd have to stage it. It was like a whole thing. Then you have to edit the images. And it was also taking up a lot of time. And as much as I thought it was interesting and exciting, and I loved the creative aspect of it, it was such a time suck away from everything else I wanted to do, like the creation of the recipes and the sharing of my stories. So I'm glad I do not photograph anymore. But it did teach me a lot. Like, because when I do get photos, I'm like, no, I would prefer the lighting to be like this. It's information that you need to know. And that's why I always tell, like, learn every aspect of your business, because even if you don't want to do it at some point, when you train someone else to do it, or you give that off to someone, you still need to know your craft. It's very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because because listen, when you think back to the times when you had a day job, there's nothing worse than the manager who tries to tell you how to do your job and has
you
no
like,
clue what they're talking about. You're like, bro,
right.
No, that's
right. You should be reporting to me. Like that's how you feel, right?
That's why when there's a part that I don't know, I always go in with this. Okay, you're a consultant to me. You are teaching me.
Right.
I don't know anything about this. Please let me know what I need to know.
Absolutely. And that's what I think. But like, as I think back, I think now that I have so many people helping with my blog, I am so grateful that I was doing everything originally, because I did learn so much about it and I know exactly what needs to be done.
What's been the hardest thing for you to let go? Like, scaling is a difficult thing to do, partially because some of the reason why you got into it, you no longer can do all of those things. Hardest thing for you to let go of as a part of your business.
I would say probably the testing. Like, I have help with testing now of the recipes. But because, having recipes continue to come out, I'm traveling a lot, entrusting people that they know exactly what I feel is a standard for my website and the recipes that I want to present to my audience. Having that trust in people was difficult. So it took time for me to really build that relationship with those that I work with that test recipes for my website, but it was necessary in order to continue to grow.
Yeah. And I think scaling is the hardest thing, especially for businesses that are based. I think it's the hardest thing, period, for businesses. And that's when a lot of businesses either fail or decide to stay at the level where they are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then when it's built on who you are, like that's one of my struggles right now as my business grows is how do I, when my business is built on me as an individual,
Yeah. And
how
you're the personality, and people don't associate the brand without you.
right. That's a hard one. Any advice? Look, any advice for me on that?
I mean, right? Because that's something that I also struggle with because, for instance, a lot of my social media is me making the recipes, right? It's like everyone has come to know Grandbaby Cakes is Jocelyn, like that, those two are intertwined. And so being able to step back and figure out ways in which people will still identify the brand, but without me solely being in the center of it has been something I've been working towards because you want to retrain your audience, basically. You want to take that time to retrain them. And so I've noticed like a lot of my friends try to figure this out because when you are so much part of your brand, it becomes difficult. People are like, where's Jocelyn at?
Right.
But I have hired other people to do videos for me. They're not necessarily in the videos, but you can see their hands making the videos. Like I've had to figure out ways in which I can step back or I would completely be burned out.
Right. And one of the things you talk about, which I love, and it was something that I didn't even realize would be part of my brand, is the self-care aspect. And I think the reason why people, because one day I just started doing videos on Sundays because I was like, this is my self-care day, self-care Sunday, whatever. And it became like this, I didn't even plan it, right? But I think the reason why people respond to that is because they instinctively know there's something good in that. And I truly have come to the point where I'm like, you can't have success without self-care. And that's something you talk about is like the living of your life makes for this content, makes everything richer. And I see a lot of connection between the emotion of food and self-care, good memories and self-care. Can you talk about what that means for you, what that looks like in your world? Because that's kind of what you're saying when you say I'm handing things off to other people because you're making space.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think one thing that becomes really difficult for people who are very driven is that separation and the stop down, like learning to step away from your business so you can take care of yourself, so you can come back to your business 100%. And so I started working with a business coach. This was like a year and a half ago, where she started telling me to take quarterly breaks. And that meant, for instance, at the very beginning of this year, I went to the Cayman Islands by myself for 6 days.
Without your baby?
Without everyone, by myself.
Oh my God. Congratulations. That is so difficult when you have small children.
It's very difficult.
And a husband too.
And a husband. I was like, sayonara. So they've gotten used to this because I will do this because I do so much for everyone, right? Like I'm wife and mom and business owner, and I travel for work. I'm doing so much. And I realized that like I was burning out like every single year. I know when it's coming, and I was like, I gotta get my break. And I do nothing. I sit on the beach. I read books. I like read 3-4 books in those days because I'm doing literally nothing else. I'm relaxing. I'm journaling. And it's incredible because I come back so excited, so invigorated, and I'm ready to work. And then also I started giving myself every Sunday I take off completely. And I also every night take an hour bath. I actually talk a lot about this in Everyday Grand because like I said, when I said it's more than a cookbook, like I have the recipes, but I also talk about the ways in which you can enrich your life. Just the things that make me happy, the things that make every single day grand, even beyond food.
Let's talk about this bath though, sis. Wait,
an
hour every night.
Every night from 7 to 8.
Oh, it's even scheduled in at a particular
it's scheduled
time.
At a particular time.
So
7 to 8.
You feed the baby.
Yeah, everyone's eating, and I'm like, peace. And then I go take my bubble bath, lock the door. No one comes in. Actually, at this point, no one even tries to really bother me. Like they know what's up. They know this is my thing. And I have my meditation music going. Literally, the elevator music is like filling the space, and I'm reading books, reading.
Oh, Jocelyn, I love that. You know what's interesting? Last season, one of the women I interviewed, her name is
Uh-huh.
Frances Hondal. She's a CEO at Citibank, a
Yeah.
president or something at she's in
Yes.
she's a president of one of their divisions. But she says she does a different one. She keeps an hour in the middle of her workday that cannot be booked. And
Oh, I love that.
she schedules, she like at the beginning of every year, she says she blocks out, I think it's noon to 1 every day. She said, now every day,
Wow.
it doesn't always end up being at that time, but
Right,
she
because things
does it
fluctuate. Right.
exactly. But she said that way she guarantees she has a catch up time in the middle of her day.
I love that. Just a
Yeah.
moment, just a moment. And we need that. And so like I find that like once kind of the day is unwinding, because it helps me too, just to sort of just bring down the craziness, right? Like, and I focus on something completely different. It's, whatever I'm reading, it's nothing related to business. I'm just reading my mystery books, whatever I got reviews on Goodreads. That's amazing. That's what I'm reading. It has nothing to do with work. And it completely takes me out of the mindset of like, da, 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 da.
When did you start doing that, and what difference have you seen in your work since then?
I've actually probably been doing this for about 7 years.
Wow.
The bath
Wow.
time. Yeah.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
that. So even
I've been
before
doing it for
baby.
even before baby.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
I find it to be necessary. Like even when I'm traveling, I'm like, does my room have a bathtub? Okay. Like I need to like it's like one of the things before I even book a hotel. I'm like, I need my bath. I need my bath. It's like, a non-negotiable. And I think that that's one of those things too. Like when you build it out and you make it a habit, right? Because we're always talking about like habits, like forming habits, but usually they're like bad habits most people have. But like, what are these good habits that we're forming that for a fact? Oh, it's bath time. Okay, guys, I'll see you in an hour.
I love that so much, and that it's sacred for you.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you even need some of that because you work in a space where there isn't a whole lot of us. There's not a
Oh,
whole lot. There's not a
not at
whole lot
all.
of Black, and in food, even though it's a weird thing because even though food and preparation in the home is seen as woman's work, traditionally speaking, even though
Yes,
that is
yes.
starting to change,
Right.
the chefery world is very
Men.
male driven. So,
Hmm.
how has leaning into your identity as a Black woman and the Black culture of food
Yeah.
helped you and your business move forward? And have there been moments where you felt like that, even though that's an identifier and a point of uniqueness and authenticity, I'm
Hmm.
sure it's been a challenge too, right?
Oh, absolutely. So it's like we talk about being authentic and building a brand about around like who you truly are. And I find like grandbaby cakes is exactly that. It's based on family, it's based on honoring the women that came before me, it's based on legacy. And I realized very early on, like this was a story that really wasn't being told. And so there was a way for me to find a space and create space within an industry where I wasn't present before. But there's the pros and the cons of that because I wasn't there before, which meant I had to work really hard to push through the door. And when I was there, I had to keep announcing in rooms, hey, pay attention. So I think that it's one of those things that because in a lot of spaces that I work in, whether it's food, television, or the influencer space, or working with brands, it's become one of those sticking points where I have to tell people, no, I am not the only representative for Black culture and food. This is my perspective. This is my point of view. And there should be more spaces at the table for many of us to share our points of view. Just because I'm Black and, had a grandmother from the South, and sure, a lot of people can identify with that, but that doesn't make the only story that Black women can tell. You need other points of view at the table as well. So I'm
It
hoping that I'm opening that space up more.
I do too, because I believe one of our forebears in Black history said, they're always looking for the magical Negro.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like, because I remember in college when people first started talking about diversity and things like that. One of the things that we used to talk about, is there a universal Black experience? And I think people want there to be that, because then it's easier to wrap your arms around who we are as human beings. And it's just not true. We are all those things, just like everybody is all those things in whatever their community is. One of the things I want to get back to, challenges. We've talked a lot about challenges throughout this conversation.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the most heartbreaking or disappointing thing that has happened for you? And how did you bounce back from it?
Yeah.
And then have the disappointments and challenges helped you get a system in place on how to fail forward? People talk about that failing forward as small business owners. What is that process, and what was the thing that gave you that system to do it?
Oh my gosh. So I actually have a couple. I mean, I like, but you can't, I have probably a million, but like a few come to mind because like, when people think of successful people, they never think of, what they call failure. They never think of how hard it is, how it still is hard, every single day. Like I still hear no. That's part of it. Right. But you just become more fine with it. Like you just keep moving on. You're like, oh yeah, okay. But it's like you're like, oh no, that's fine. What I find to be one of the most important things that helped me was with my first book deal. Before Grandbaby Cakes came about, I actually had a book deal to write a book about pies. Yes, pies, yes. From a publisher. And I'd quit my job at this time because I was going to go all in. I was like, okay, this is it. This is the moment. I'm going to write my first book. And then when we got to the final contract phase, they were like, oh no, we're not going to pay this much for this book. Honestly, it was only a $10,000 advance, because I keep it real. It was a $10,000 advance. They were like, because no one's going to buy a book from you. This is what I was told. I was like, no one's going to buy a book from me. They're like, it's not going to sell.
Wait, the people who said they would publish your book said that nobody would get what you were doing the offer for.
Right. Well, so that's the thing. It's always like different divisions, right? So you have an editor that makes the bid on the book, and then it goes through accounting and all of that, and the lawyers get involved, and then they start running numbers, and then they decide the value of this book and whether they actually agree with that. And they did not agree with it. And the deal fell through in the midst of me having no job. And I mean, it was the best thing that ever happened for sure, as you look at it now, because first of all, it was actually great. They were right. I'm Grandbaby Cakes. I should not have been starting to write a book about pies as my first book. But then I had another publisher that was like, no, like you definitely have this unique point of view. Like, have you ever thought about writing a book about cake and like your experience? And I was like, duh, like, yeah, that's what I should be writing. And I took a very personal approach to the book. That wasn't something that they originally wanted me to do with the pie books. Like, if you look at a lot of cookbooks, they are usually like the recipes and that's it, right? But I wanted it to really be very centralized, like in my family origins and history. And I wanted these vintage images of family throughout the book. Like I really wanted to sort of make a photo album, like this vintage photo album with recipes mixed in. And my, publisher was just so open and went along for the ride and really let me just take the creative reins of what I wanted to do. And I feel really blessed now because that was not the experience I was going to have with my original publisher.
Girl, God be protecting you.
Absolutely. And so like, that's the thing, right? That's the thing. Like you think in the moment, you're like, oh no, like complete panic sets in. And, when you are building a business and a brand, you are going to hear no like a million times. Like when people are like, oh, you're co-hosting this show, like, oh, you're on that show. I'm like, I could list a million shows that told me no, a million auditions or a million pilots I shot where it fell through at the last minute. And this is how it works. And you have to get used to it, because that doesn't mean no forever. It just means no right now, and it could lead to something better in the future. So changing my mindset is the best part of what I've been able to do. And I don't sweat it at all. You cannot sweat any of it.
Yeah, look at that no as a blessing. When things start getting a little hinky, I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
It's good, boo. It's good. Because in the back of my mind, I'm going, my mom and my daddy are protecting me and with God on high, and they're intervening because they see something that I can't see. Another thing I think, though, is when you hear no so many times, you do get used to it as a word, because I think, especially in American culture, we don't like hearing no. And I think my early years of acting, auditioning for, and even for voiceover work, which is very distanced, right? Like you never hear the no, you just don't get called.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, well, I guess that was a no.
Exactly. Right. That actually made me immune to no, because I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's a no then. And
you move on and you keep going. Yeah. It makes you stronger. It really does. Like, I think the auditioning process, like all of that is actually really good for your soul at the end of the day.
It's humbling.
It is so humbling. It keeps you so humble, and it also keeps you hungry. You know, you just keep going. You just keep pushing forward, and you know, you just realize it's like something's coming for me. You just don't give up. And I love that. Like I personally, and it also makes you brave. It makes you brave, right? Because you don't fear hearing no as much. You're like, oh, I've heard it before. I'm gonna just go after it anyway. What's the worst thing someone can say? No. I've heard it before. It's fine.
Exactly.
So yeah, it just changes your mindset. It makes you so much braver.
I love that. I love how no, girl, I never thought about how no could lead to braveness. Never.
It does.
Never thought about how courage comes from, sis. I got to do a whole post on how courage comes from no.
From countless no's. You're braver now. You're just like, oh yeah. The more no's you hear, the braver you become.
Look at little Jocelyn Delk Adams with all the wisdom. Sis.
The pearls, dropping the pearls. Yes. It's so true, though. Because if you've only heard a few no's, like you're pretty timid, right? You haven't had the courage to really go after something, because it's never just going to be handed to you.
Not the stuff you really want.
Not the stuff you really want.
Not in, girl. And you know what the thing too is, this is a reminder today that the no is a protection too.
Yeah, it is.
Like what would have happened what kind of experience would you have had you gone with that pie publisher?
Right? The pie publisher, you know, it wasn't the book that I truly wanted to write. Mm-hmm. You know, it was actually, the idea came from my literary agent, who is actually still my literary agent now. But like with my last book, I was like, this is what I want to write. And she's like, you write it. She now knows to trust me. And she's like, yeah, pie books are doing really well. That's how I ended up in this whole pie book like scenario in the beginning. It's because we were looking at the market and they weren't considering me, the individual, and what my brand was and what I would actually excel in.
Yep. And all those things have to go together. I'm at the beginning stages of that now. I just signed my book deal in the fall.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And I feel blessed because my experience was not the pie publisher experience.
Good for you.
I got, we had already started working on a proposal, and based on the work that I believe in, my literary agent actually made it better. And then we found, there were a few editors who were interested, but we found one editor who was like, yes,
got it.
I live this. This is what I get. And she has been an amazing advocate. And
you need that. You need the rock star editor that gets it, because they will always advocate for you.
Yeah. And so I'm praying for the best, because when I hear you say the accountants were looking at, like, I don't know anything about that because that wasn't my experience in the
Oh
negotiation,
yeah. Oh
right?
yeah. But it's all a blessing now. It's fantastic.
Because look at you now, sis.
Cause look,
Look,
I'm like, y'all made a mistake. But you know, like
does the petty live in your family too? When you
right.
like,
I feel like I should send a like a note, like, no one's gonna buy my book, huh? But that's just part of it, you know. Like they weren't meant to be on my journey. I wasn't meant to be on their journey, and it's fine.
I love it. I love it. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
To just go after it 100%. Just don't listen to what anyone says, just go after it. And I think like having the tunnel vision, I mean, like everyone around me is probably like, Jocelyn, you're obsessed. Like I hear that a lot, but it's helped me so much because like that focus on what I want and just going 100% into it and not questioning, what's going to happen, whether I'm going to fail or succeed, has always ended up helping me because I know for a fact I'm going to succeed. Because whenever you put 100% into something, you're going to succeed.
And sometimes the success doesn't look like what you thought it was, but it's
absolutely
still
a success.
Yeah,
it's still a success.
So you've had a lot of amazing accomplishments since you started Grandbaby Cakes. Like, I mean, you're moving into what, year 11 at this point?
Oh my gosh, yes, I'm moving into. I cannot believe that.
You've been doing it over a decade now.
Yeah.
When you look back at your achievements, what are you most proud of? And then what are you still dreaming of doing? Because with that obsession, I know there's a list that goes with that.
There truly is. So I will say that like when I think back at like on this journey, like there's always a picture like in my mind. Like there was a picture I took of my grandmother before she passed where she was holding the Grandbaby Cakes cookbook. And that was my proudest moment. Like when she first saw that cookbook, I remember taking the photo. She saw it and she was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like it's always in my mind. Like I remember it like it was yesterday. And then I remembered the moment we took that photo. And so when I look at that photo, it just reminds me like what that vision was originally that I had for the book, how I wanted this to be, really she was the muse for it. She was the muse for my cookbook and for my brand, and for her to see that walk and that journey and it come to that moment and she physically be able to hold something that represented what she always meant to me was the best moment. And I will say, in terms of dreams, oh my gosh, I love dreams, right? Because you have to keep having them. You have to keep going after something that's hard. And you have to keep challenging yourself, even when, and it has to be so hard that it makes you anxious. It makes you scared. Like you have to attack things like that. So, so the first thing was putting out my cake line with Williams Sonoma. Like that was like really scary, but so exciting. But now with this book, because I feel like this is my most personal book yet. I was like, my dream is the New York Times bestseller list. And it's not even just because of that. It's because it's something that's very hard for Black authors to achieve. And we rarely have Black cookbooks that make that list, rarely. So it feels like something that's much bigger than me that I'm going after.
I cannot wait to see you on the top of that list and celebrate with you, sis.
Thank you, sis, so much.
And since I've seen the whole progression of Grandbaby Cakes from a distance.
Yes, no, you were there, not even,
Yeah, but it's like what I've watched along the way. I cannot tell you how it makes my heart sing. The last question I always ask every guest is this. When do you feel that you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of you?
When I'm in the kitchen with my daughter, because it's really funny how it's kind of like a 180, right? Like I started at a position, and now my daughter is the next generation, and I'm sort of passing this legacy to her, and seeing the excitement and the joy in her face when we're baking cookies, or she'll just see me go in the kitchen. She's like, "Oh, let's put our aprons on. Let's bake something." Like, she gets so excited about it. And it's like almost like a moment of like deja vu. Like, I'm remembering being in the kitchen with my mom and in the kitchen with my grandmother, and just seeing that it's like all of this continues to pass forward, and that moment just makes me so excited and happy.
I love it too. One of my favorite things about your blog and books is how we see the matrilineal lineage. I love seeing your
Amen.
grandmother, your mother, you, your daughter, and because that is such a backbone of our community
It
that
is.
I don't know we see in the way that you present it. And that's what I remember in both of my grandmother's homes with my aunt,
Yes.
with my aunties
Yes, the aunties.
and
Yes.
and now my cousins. Like, we had a whole moment, girl, one time, I think it was a Thanksgiving, where my aunt was sitting on the couch and me and my cousins were all in the kitchen, just kind of shoo-shooing, drinking, talking, eating, cooking,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
All the good stuff.
I look over and Annie Faye is sitting there, all in her feelings, very, very
Yes.
Cancerian, very Cancerian,
Yeah.
all in her feelings.
Just
I
all
said,
of
Annie,
it.
Annie Faye, you okay? She said, it's just so beautiful to see all of y'all. Just,
Yeah.
the torch has passed.
The torch has
She had a
passed.
whole thing. I brought her a glass of
Absolutely.
wine and was like, ma'am, we good.
Yes.
She was like,
It's you. I love that you said that, because I used to get messages, like a few, they'd be like, "Well, where's your uncle? Where's your husband?" And I was like, "This focus, my brand is about the Black women who made this, who created this, and the legacy that they left. And that's what you will see. And you will see the legacy I'm passing to my daughter. It's about the women. This is what this is." So thank you. That means a lot to me.
it's everything, sis. It is everything. Darling, I have so enjoyed our time together today. Thank
Same.
you so much for taking the moment.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Thank you so much for
I
having
cannot
me.
tell you how proud I am of you and how happy I am for you and all your success. Every time I see you pop up, even when you in head to toe pink and green, I'll be like, that's my girl. That's my girl.
That means so much to me. You have no idea. I feel really, really blessed. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I loved that conversation. I had two very big aha moments with Jocelyn that motivated me right after we spoke to make some more changes for myself and how I've been working. And there are a lot of high level things I want to talk about too. So this is going to take a second. Let's get into it. Starting with the things that inspired me to change. She confirmed for me that I was on the right track when it came to the importance of self-care, the idea of taking care of yourself beyond the everyday, right? This refinement for me is I've been thinking about daily scheduled self-care, working out, eating right, meditating, but how she also incorporates this me time that might feel indulgent any other time so that she can come back to her business 100%. That nightly scheduled unplugged bath time reading mystery novels where she leaves business behind the whole way. I absolutely love that because I've been looking at that part of it as sort of a weekly thing. So I'm still trying to figure out how to put it into my life, but I'm interested to see what happens in the same way it has worked for her. Now, also her advice about when you're expanding your business and doing more work, the importance of letting things go and letting others do them and finding a way to do it that is still honoring the connection it has to you from the perspective of the people who either consume your content or use your products or what have you, but also from your own perspective, respecting how you can still be part of it, because that's been a struggle for me as I expand my business. Then the higher level philosophies of how and why she works touched my heart so much. How to process the word no, that when you're building a business, and I identify with this, and I think this is true no matter how you progress or what it is, whether you're an entrepreneur or working in corporate, you're going to hear no a million times. But understanding that that doesn't mean no forever, it just means no right now. And how the more no's you hear, the braver you become because you've survived all those other ones. And the other thing I love is how or what if we could make this moment special, no matter what it is, that life is in the now, and how she grounded herself by going back to the things that made herself happy, that made her life special, how made the moments special and be fulfilled, and knowing where that place is. For her, it's the kitchen, but I think we all have a place like that, whether it's connected to our work or not. And then, and I think this is so important during Women's History Month, I love how her work is so intentionally about legacy, based on honoring the women who came before her, the Black women, her grandmother who created these recipes, passed them on to her, showed her how to do it, and how she is passing that legacy on to her own daughter, and how the women are at the center. And that is central to my celebration of Women's History Month. And I've been thinking about the ways in which my work, and I've talked about this before, about how some core parts of my work come from my mother and the work that she did in helping me to become better at speaking and doing my work. So, and how I haven't always been doing it intentionally, but how I'm passing that on to others. So thank you, Jocelyn, so much for inspiring me and others, for sharing so much of what you've learned and being such a bright light with the good food to boot. I also appreciate you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners, for your attention and your support. I could not do this without you. I would not do it without my amazing production team either. It wouldn't be possible. I hope you will like, rate, review, download, subscribe, and share this episode. It's available every place you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. And please join my community too by following me at JM Sparrow. That's on Instagram and Twitter, and at Ms. Jeanne Sparrow on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, where you find this podcast. Thanks so much for dropping by and saying hi, sharing your comments, your questions, your thoughts, your suggestions. I appreciate them all. This has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow.